The wheel sang its one rusted note, a sound that had long ago replaced the tinnitus of the before. It was the rhythm of Corbin's days. Squeak, shove. His canvas coveralls, stiff with layers of old grime, chafed the back of his neck. The cart's handles were slick under his calloused palms, 2 from the west wall today, hung up on the rebar spikes like grotesque marionettes. He used a long steel hook to pry them loose, the bodies thudding into the cart's metal basin with a wet, heavy sound. They were cargo, same as the sacks of meal, same as the salvaged scrap. He did not look at their faces. The job was easier when you did not look at the faces. The third pickup was from the infirmary, a clean white bag, tightly sealed. It felt different, lighter, less chaotic. He heaved it on top of the 2 shamblers, the plastic crinkling in protest. Cargo was cargo. He repeated the words in his head until they lost their meaning and became a simple hum, a companion to the squeaking wheel. His kingdom was a circle of scorched earth at the far edge of Haven, downwind from everything. A brick and steel incinerator squatted in the center, its chimney a permanent smudge against the gray sky. The air tasted of ash and chemicals. Corbin rolled the cart to the edge of the pit, the heat a dry pressure against his skin. It was a familiar feeling, almost a comfort. He worked with an economy of motion honed by 1,000 identical runs. He unzipped the first shambler bag. The stench bloomed, sharp and rotten. He hooked the corpse under the arms and, with a grunt and a pivot, swung it into the fiery mouth of the incinerator. The flames leaped, hungry. The second followed, 2 down. He paused before the white bag. He ran a thumb along the zipper. The protocol was the same for all of them, a final check for bites. Prefect Vance was particular about the protocols. Corbin pulled the zipper down. The face was pale, peaceful, young, maybe 20. Liam Reyes. He'd seen him around the square, always sketching in a little notebook. There was no rot, no milky eyes or blackened veins. Corbin's gloved fingers traced the line of the boy's jaw, then moved to the collar of his shirt. He nudged the fabric aside. Just below the ear, nestled in the soft skin of the neck, was a small, dark puncture. Too clean, too precise. His gaze drifted down to the boy's hands. They were clenched tight with the rigor of death. In the right fist, trapped between pale fingers, was a small shape of dark wood. Get on with it, filth. The voice cut through the roar of the fire. Hesk. Corbin did not have to turn to know. He could feel the presence of the man, the solid, well-fed bulk of him. He heard the crunch of gravel under the boots of Hesk's squad, 4 of them. This was not normal. Supervision was not part of the protocol. Vance wants a clean sweep today, Hesk barked, his voice thick with impatience. No lingering. Corbin kept his back to them. His eyes were fixed on the wooden object in Liam's hand. It was a bird, he could see now, intricately carved, with delicate wings swept back. A flicker of something unwelcome, something sharp and hot, pricked through the layers of his numbness. He reached for his hooking pole, leaning against the cart. His hand fumbled. The heavy steel pole slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the ashen ground near the body bag. Clumsy rat, Hesk sneered. Corbin bent down in a fluid, practiced motion. The crouch of a man used to lifting heavy things, back straight, legs coiled. His left hand closed around the cool metal of the pole. His right hand, grimy and quick, brushed against Liam's cold knuckles. The wooden bird came free. It was small, light, its edges surprisingly sharp against his skin. He palmed it, straightened up, and shoved the object deep into his coverall pocket, all in the same seamless movement. He did not look at Hesk. He looked at the fire. He gripped Liam's body under the arms, lighter than the others. He swung him toward the flames. For a second, the boy's peaceful face was illuminated by the orange glow. Then the fire took him. The plastic bag melted away in a black hiss. The walk back to Haven Center felt different. The cart was empty, but a new weight settled in his pocket. He pushed through the main square, the heart of their cramped, orderly world. People moved aside, giving him and his stinking cart a wide berth. He was invisible, a necessary function nobody wanted to acknowledge. His eyes found the large wooden notice board next to the communal well. A new sheet of paper was tacked to the center, the ink crisp and black. By decree of Prefect Vance, Mino Eldes, cited for seditious speech against the security and stability of Haven. Posthumously diagnosed with a fast-acting neural strain consistent with the turn. Disposal enacted per quarantine protocol. A lie. A neat, official lie. Across the square, a figure stood perfectly still. Alara Reyes, Liam's sister. She was not crying. Her face was a mask of stone, her posture a rigid line of defiance. She was watching the notice board. Or maybe she was watching him, the man who pushed the cart. He could not tell. The wooden bird in his pocket felt impossibly heavy, its sharp edges dug into his palm. It was not a bird, it was a stone, one that could either anchor him to the bottom or be the only thing worth throwing. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was already being watched. The wooden bird was a stone in his pocket. It pressed against his thigh with every step, a constant, nagging reminder that the world had tilted on its axis. Invisibility had been his craft, a life's work of slumped shoulders, downcast eyes, and the camouflaging stench of grime. Now, that craft was failing him. The main concourse looked the same recycled air tasting of mildew and boiled cabbage, the same hollow echoes of shod feet on concrete, the same listless river of humanity flowing between work shifts and ration lines. But he saw it differently. He saw Hesk's enforcers, their clean, dark uniforms, a stark rebuke to the stained canvas of everyone else. They did not just stand guard, they watched. Their gazes lingered on certain people, a fraction of a second too long, cataloging whispers and discontent. Conversations that had previously been background noise now snagged his attention, only to fall silent as his sanitation cart squeaked past. He was no longer a ghost in the machine. He was a faulty part, drawing the system's attention. A figure stepped from a recessed doorway, blocking his path. You. Corbin flinched, his hand instinctively going to the wrench on his hip. It was a woman, her face sharp with a grief that had curdled into anger. Wiry, practical, her hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch the skin at her temples. Alara, Liam's partner from the reclamation crew. They said he was careless, that he went into an unstable sector. Her voice was low, but it cut through the concourse drone. Liam was never careless, not about the work, not about anything. Corbin kept his head down, focusing on a smear of protein paste on the floor. I just clean what's left. I saw you at the incinerator. She took a step, closer, invading the small bubble of anonymity he tried to maintain. Hesk's men were watching you, demanding your report. What did you see? He shook his head, a small, tight motion. To speak was to be noticed. To be noticed was to be a nail sticking up, waiting for the hammer. Nothing. Dust. That's all. Liar. The word was not loud, but it struck him like a blow. Her eyes, narrowed and fierce, pinned him. He wouldn't have been there. He was seditious, they said. Planning. Liam wouldn't plan something that stupid. He was careful. The word hung in the air. See careful. Liam had been careful. The thought echoed the frantic, silent scream in Corbin's own mind. He looked up, meeting her gaze for the first time. He saw no trap, only a desperate need for a truth he was terrified to own. His hand trembled as it dipped into his pocket. He did not offer the bird, he simply opened his palm. The carved piece of wood sat there, absurdly delicate against his filth-caked skin. Her breath hitched. She took it from him, her technician's fingers turning it over and over. Her thumb traced the smooth lines, then stopped. There's a seam. It was almost invisible, a perfect join in the grain. With a sharp fingernail, she worked at it. A tiny section of the bird's belly popped open. Inside, nestled in the hollow, was a cylinder of paper no bigger than a grain of rice. She unrolled it with painstaking care. The letters were tiny, pricked into the paper with a pin. Torn, ANN. They stared at the cryptic message under the buzzing fluorescent lights, the meaning a locked door. Before they could speak, the bell signaling shift change clanged through the concourse, and the river of people swelled. They were just 2 more whispers in the grime. Later, the note felt like another stone in his pocket, resting beside the bird. He was on his hands and knees in a crawl space, the smell of dust and hot ozone thick in his throat. Above him, through the metal grate of a ventilation shaft, came the muffled voices of the council. He was cleaning the filters, a job no one else wanted, a job that let him hear things. Usually, he tuned it out. It was all the same. Rations, power cycle, the torn canvas of his coveralls gaped at the shoulder, a dark patch spreading from the raw muscle beneath. Corbin sat on the edge of his cot, the faint light of a tallow lamp making his shadow long and thin against the concrete wall. He worked a strip of clean rag around the gash on his forearm, hissing through his teeth as the fabric bit into the wound. The pain was a sharp, clean thing in the fog of his exhaustion. The door scraped open. Alara stood there, a silhouette against the dim corridor light. She stepped inside, her presence filling the small room. Her eyes, quick and dark, took in the makeshift bandage, the blood, the slump of his shoulders. "We don't have time for that." Corbin finished the knot, his fingers clumsy. It needed closing. "They'll close you a lot worse if they find us." "They'll find us, Corbin. Vance doesn't leave loose ends." She paced the short length of the room, a caged animal. "We have a child's toy, a scribbled note, and 2 names. It's nothing. It's a ghost story. It's all we have." "Then it's not enough." She stopped, her face inches from his. He could see the fine lines of strain around her eyes, the smudge of dirt high on her cheekbone. "There's one person who sees everybody, one person who signs the paper that turns a murder into a misfortune." Corbin looked at his hands, stained with grease and now his own blood. The name was a stone in his gut. Thorn. Asymptomatic. The air grew colder with each flight of stairs he descended. Down in the sub-basement, it was a damp, biting cold that had nothing to do with the outside world, and everything to do with what the space was used for. The scent of bleach was sharp in his nostrils, a chemical ghost trying and failing to haunt the deeper, sweeter smell of decay. A single fluorescent tube on the ceiling was the only light. It buzzed, a trapped insect sound, and threw a flickering, unsteady glare across the room. Along one wall stood a bank of stainless steel lockers, their doors seamless and blank. In the center of the room, an autopsy table gleamed under the erratic light. Dr. Thorne was wiping it down with a gray rag, his movements small and jittery. His medical coat was a mess of stains, the white long since surrendered to a dingy gray. His back was to the door. Corbin let his footsteps sound on the concrete. Thorne flinched, a full body jerk, and spun around. His glasses were smudged, his face soft and pale. Sweat beaded on his thinning hair. "We're closed. Morgue is closed." Corbin walked toward him, stopping on the other side of the steel table. The surface reflected their distorted figures. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have the energy for anger. He had something heavier. He had something heavier. He reached into his coveralls and placed the small wooden bird on the table between them. Its painted eye stared up at the buzzing light. Thorne's gaze dropped to the bird. His fidgeting stopped. For a moment, he was perfectly still. "Anya," Corbin said. The name was barely a whisper, but in the sterile silence of the morgue, it was as loud as a scream. "They're going to kill her." The doctor's eyes darted from the bird to Corbin's face and back again, refusing to meet his. A tremor started in his hand, making the rag shake. "Just like Liam," Corbin added. "Just like the others you signed off on. You put your name to it." This was not an accusation. He made it sound like a simple, undeniable fact, like the coldness of the room. "You're the only one who can stop it." Thorne made a choked sound. His whole body seemed to shrink, to dissolve under the weight of the 2 names. His gaze was fixed on the bird, on that single spot of painted color in his gray world. He saw the girl who had carried it. He saw the boy whose file he had falsified. Corbin could see it happening. The man's armor of denial, thin and brittle, cracked. A wave of guilt, real and sickening, washed over his face, turning it ashen. "What do you want?" Thorne's voice was a ragged croak. "The truth. The real records. Your testimony." The doctor shook his head, a frantic, useless gesture. He'll kill me. Vance, you don't understand. He's going to kill a child, Corbin said, his voice flat. And you're going to help him do it again. Look at me. Thorne slowly, painfully lifted his head. Corbin held his gaze. There was no threat in his eyes, only a hollowed-out certainty. The doctor broke. He slumped against the table, his breath coming in ragged puffs. Midnight, he whispered, the words tumbling out. The generator transfer. The lights flicker for a minute. Meet me. The main infirmary. I keep the originals locked in my desk there. I'll write it all down, everything. The main infirmary was a lie. It was clean and orderly, a testament to a world that no longer existed. The cots were neatly made, the floors swept, the medical supplies arranged on shelves with a precision that felt insane. Bright, steady light flooded the room, a bubble of civilization in the dark. Corbin slipped inside just as the overhead lamps wavered, buzzing as the settlement switched from the day generator to the night one. In the center of the room, a metal brazier filled with glowing red embers cast a warm, dancing light. The infirmary was not empty. Prefect Marcus Vance stood beside the brazier, warming his hands. He wore a dark wool sweater, clean and perfectly fitted, and pressed trousers. Not a speck of the settlement's grime touched him. At his side, silent and immense, stood Hesk, his hand resting near the hilt of the blade strapped to his thigh. Dr. Thorne was not there. Of course he wasn't. The flicker of hope in Corbin's chest went out, replaced by a cold, heavy certainty that settled in his stomach. Vance turned, his face calm, almost pleasant. Corbin, I was hoping you'd come. He gestured to the room around them. This is what we're protecting, not just walls and rations. An idea. The idea that we can be better than the chaos outside, that we can have order. Corbin said nothing. He watched Hesk, a block of impassive violence waiting for a command. Dissent, Vance continued, his voice soft, reasonable, is a poison. A single spore can contaminate the entire organism. You think I enjoy this? I don't. I'm a surgeon, excising a sickness before it spreads. It is a terrible, necessary duty. He held out his hand, not a command, an invitation, the note, from the bird. Liam's little message in a bottle. May I? Corbin felt a tremor of pure, defiant hatred, but he knew it was over. He slowly reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the small, folded scrap of paper. He pulled it out and held it up. Vance took it with a delicate pinch of his fingers. He didn't read it. He knew what it said. He held it over the brazier and let it go. The paper browned, then curled, the names turning to black ash before a final orange flicker consumed them entirely. Proof is irrelevant, Vance said, watching the last of it vanish. Order is everything. He gave a sympathetic sigh, a gesture of pure theater that made Corbin's skin crawl. You see, Corbin, you've been working too hard. You're exhausted. Sick. Vance nodded to Hesk. A hand clamped down on Corbin's shoulder. It felt like a metal vise. The grip was absolute, crushing muscle against bone. Dr. Thorne has already signed the certificate, Vance said, his voice retaining its placid, paternal tone. Asymptomatic neural necrosis. Tragic, but necessary. With a smooth, practiced motion, Hesk turned him. The infirmary door swung open, not as a passage to a place of healing, but as the dark, waiting mouth of a tomb. The world had shrunk to concrete and antiseptic. Corbin sat on the edge of the metal frame, the thin mattress a pathetic comfort. He was a body waiting for disposal, an inconvenience to be incinerated. He had known men who ended up in this room. They were always the ones who asked the wrong question, or saw the wrong thing, or simply looked at an enforcer with an expression that was not sufficiently grateful. Now it was his turn. He looked at his hands. They rested on his knees, palms up, like offerings to a god who had long since abandoned the church. They were not merely dirty. The grime was a part of him, a second skin tattooed into every crease and callus. It was the black soil of the hydroponics bay, the greasy residue from the generator maintenance, the faint, rust-colored stain of the water filtration system. A map of his life in Haven, a life spent in the parts of the settlement no one else wanted to see. Invisible. Unclean. Despair was a heavy, suffocating thing. It pressed on his chest, stole the air from his lungs. He thought of Anya, of the quiet dignity she carried, and the brutal way it had been extinguished. He thought of Liam, a boy who was all sharp angles and nervous energy, silenced forever. He was the next link in the chain, the man who knew, now scheduled for erasure. He stared at the floor, at the small metal drain grate set in the center of the smooth concrete. He remembered it. 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. He had been swabbing the infirmary floors, his movements automatic, his mind elsewhere. He had noticed the grate was loose in its housing. One of the retaining screws had rusted through. He made a mental note to requisition a new one, a small, forgotten detail in a day filled with them. The thought connected with another. The grime on his hands, the way people's eyes slid past him in the corridors, the way they held their breath when he brushed by. They never saw him. They only saw the filth, the symbol of the labor that kept their clean world running. They saw the job, not the man. They had locked the body in a cell. They had forgotten about the man who knew the settlement's guts. The epiphany did not crash over him. It seeped in, cold and clear as the antiseptic in the air. His filth was not a mark of shame. His invisibility was not a weakness. They were his greatest weapons. He was the unclean. He knew every drain, every service duct, every forgotten passage and haven because it was his job to crawl through them, to maintain them, to keep the rot at bay. A slow, grim smile touched Corbin's lips. It felt alien on his face. He slid off the cot and knelt by the grate. He wedged the tips of his grimy fingers into the gap, the one he had noted for repair. He pulled. The metal groaned, scraped against concrete, and then lifted free. Below was a black square, exhaling the familiar scent of damp earth and mildew. He dropped the grate beside the hole without a sound. He swung his legs into the opening, his worn boots finding a rung of a rusted ladder he knew was there. He lowered himself into the dark, into the hidden circulatory system of Haven, and pulled the grate back into place over his head. It settled with a soft, final scrape. The service tunnels were not a place for other people. They were cramped, a tangled labyrinth of pipes and conduits. For Corbin, they were a second home. He moved with a practiced economy, his shoulders brushing against slimy brickwork, his steps sure on the narrow walkway. The air was thick, but it was the air of his world. He did not need to see. He navigated by the bend of a large water main, by the hum of an electrical conduit, by the specific echo his footsteps made in a junction